And I was shown in a vision the fate of a great nation. And behold, I saw a figure whose face was as smooth as polished bronze, and whose tongue was as silver. And this one came not with sword or flame, but with whispers sweeter than honey. And the angel said to me, watch and see how the deceiver works. And I beheld how this figure went among the people, and to each he spoke a different word. To those in the east he said, your brothers in the west despise you. To those in the west he said, your kindred in the east plot against you. To the rich he whispered, the poor would steal your bread. To the poor he murmured, the rich care nothing for your suffering. And the people believed these words, each in their own tongue, for the lies were crafted to fit the shape of their fears. And slowly, as seasons turned, neighbor ceased to trust neighbor, and kin turned away from kin. And then I saw the great tearing. The nation became as a garment rent in two, each half claiming to be the true cloth. And the deceiver laughed. For he had accomplished with whispers what armies could not do with war. And the angel said unto me, this is the apocalypse, not the end by fire, but the end by forgetting. For they have forgotten they are one people, and so they are no longer one people. The kingdom divides against itself, and behold, it cannot stand. The word apocalypse is Greek for unveiling. That's what it means, to pull back the curtain. Like Dorothy exposing the Wizard of Oz, where she found not a legendary figure, but something smaller, an uncomfortable truth. Like wisdom literature of the Proverbs, or narrative histories of the book of Ruth, or the law codes like Leviticus, or the prophecies like Jeremiah, apocalypse is a genre of ancient literature. The point of apocalyptic literature is subversive. It's to tell the most important truths to those who most need them, to bring comfort to the afflicted, to offer hope in times of trial, to inspire perseverance in the face of adversity, to tell truths about the weakness of power, to remind us all that all things must end. Scholars tell us that the writer we call John was a political prisoner, exiled to the island of Patmos by Rome for the crime of sedition. The book he wrote there goes by a couple of titles, usually either The Apocalypse of John or The Book of Revelation. And if you've ever read it, you could be forgiven for wondering if John had been popping magic mushrooms like chocolate truffles. Disappointingly, scholars tell us that this was probably not true. Instead, they tell us that what John wrote was resistance literature, written for churches buckling under imperial pressure to worship Caesar as God. It was coded so that Roman authorities would neither burn the texts nor crucify whoever was caught with them. When John wrote of the great beast with 7 heads, his readers knew immediately that he was talking about Rome, a city famously built on 7 hills. When he described the whore of Babylon, drunk on the blood of martyrs, readers immediately recognized the empire that crucified their Savior and fed their friends to lions. John's prophecy wasn't about some future enemy. It was social commentary about the present one. John was telling his people, Rome calls itself eternal, divine, the bringer of peace. But when we look with clear eyes, we see that it is a monster that devours nations and demands your immortal soul as tribute. Now, even with that understood, the early church leaders had a really hard time with the book of Revelation. For centuries, they debated whether it should be read at all. Some said it was too dangerous, too political, too easily misunderstood. Many wanted to exclude it entirely. Why it made the cut is an interesting story. But today I just want to point out that it is not the only apocalypse in the Bible. An older one, the book of Daniel, emerged during one of Israel's darkest hours. Centuries before Rome, Israel was under the heel of a different king, this one coming down from the time of Alexander the Great. That king, Antiochus Epiphanes, had outlawed Jewish worship, desecrated Solomon's temple, and demanded he be worshipped as a god. Daniel's visions of four beasts weren't about distant kingdoms. They were about the empires that had been sequentially crushing the Jewish people up to that point: Babylon, Media, Persia, and now Greece. And when Daniel described the little horn speaking blasphemies and making war on the saints, his readers knew exactly who he meant. Daniel was saying, this king who claims divinity is just another beast. His empire, like all the others, will pass away. Only the kingdom of the Most High endures. His apocalyptic imagery and commentary gave people hope and perspective. What seemed all-powerful and eternal was actually temporary and something that had already been judged and found wanting. And that brings me to the first book of Enoch. Now, this text never made it into our Bible, though it was extremely popular with early Christians and is actually quoted repeatedly across the Hebrew Bible. From the book of Genesis through Kings, we get a whole bunch of puzzling references to early Israelite enemies, references that only make sense in the context of Enoch. But perhaps most interestingly, Enoch is the text where we learn about fallen angels and Lucifer as a king in hell. Good times. And with the other two apocalypses, scholars believe that the visions we read about in Enoch weren't about supernatural creatures. Again, they were just code for much more mundane problems you and I are unfortunately rather familiar with. Problems that demanded an indictment of oligarchy, a condemnation of political corruption, and a warning for the elites who had abandoned justice and duty for power. Enoch just wrapped that up in parables of giants, angels, demons, and war amongst the celestial powers. And that's why there's very little mystery why church leaders excluded Enoch from the canon we now know as the Bible. It was excluded precisely because it was too sharp in its social criticism, too dangerous in its implications about religious authority, too subversive. But its message survived. Even sacred institutions can become corrupt. And the first step to reformation is naming the corruption. I've been thinking about apocalypse a lot lately, and I'm sure that says something about me. About apocalypse and about naming corruption. Honestly, I'm not really sure why. It has something to do with the news? No idea. No idea. But this Memorial Day, it strikes me that on this day, the day we are called to remember those who gave, those who sacrificed, those who died, that maybe they deserve more from us than flags, rituals, and empty words. I've been wondering, what happens when we look clearly? What happens when we ask, what have we lost? When we ask, what else has died despite sacrifice? When we ask, what have we failed to keep alive? It makes me uncomfortable. Asking about the democracy our honored dead thought they were preserving, where is it now? The decency they fought to protect, what has become of it? The truth they died defending, who speaks it now without fear? These are hard questions. But I also wonder if the veil must be lifted further, if revelation requires another comfortable truth that must be named. maybe a comfortable lie even. The lie that says that the dying happened quickly, that we here today are innocent, that we are victims of forces beyond our control, that those of us who did not vote for the current wantonness bear no responsibility for the long road that brought us here. Tearing away veils reveals a harder truth. This erosion began long ago. You can push it back at least 70 years, tie it to the backlash to Brown versus Board of Education, the calculated creation of wedge issues that followed, the patient construction of Christian nationalism as a political weapon. Many of you here watched the construction of the moral majority and the religious right. You saw the Southern strategy divide us by race. You witnessed the slow strangulation of voting rights and the gerrymandering of democracy itself. You watched it unfold day by day, year by year, and decade by decade. And over the decades, the question is, what did you do? Some of you voted. Some of you wrote strong letters. Some of you grabbed signs and marched. But today, as we push at the veil, it lifts to show us this. Whatever it was we did, it wasn't enough. We who thought ourselves righteous were comfortable in our righteousness. We who claimed to care were comfortable in our caring. And in the gap, we lost something. We can squirm a bit here, and we should. But the details of our absence don't matter, just as our excuses don't matter. The truth is, we liberal Americans treat democracy like a spectator sport, showing up every few years to vote, and we believe that this work of ours is good and noble and complete. But the patient work of subversion continued around us daily, work that was unmet, unquestioned, and unstopped. And that truth is something we need to see. So today, maybe we can name bravely these other dead things, too. 1, our complacency, because citizenship in a democracy was never meant to be comfortable. 2, our retreat, because we surrounded ourselves with the already converted, leaving our opponents to believe that our silence meant consent. 3, our confusion, because we mistook momentary solidarity for actual change. We forgot that if we want change, if we want progress, if we want to disinfect, then our attention, like sunlight, must be constant. Our soldiers kept covenant with the future, but I wonder if we broke ours. I wonder if we broke it through decades of not doing enough, not caring enough, not fighting hard or long enough for what it is we claim to love. And in that breaking, in that comfortable failure, we allowed something terrible to take root and grow. And that brings me to another word that the practice of apocalypse demands we reclaim, though it also makes us squirm here in these progressive pews. And that word is evil. We have spent decades in UU circles speaking of misguided actions and unfortunate choices and systems in need of reform. We have been so careful, so afraid of sounding judgmental or ignorant or backward that we lost the ability to name evil when it stared us in the face. Evil is not a medieval superstition or fundamentalist scare tactic. Evil is the willful choice to harm others for personal gain. Evil is the deliberate cultivation of hatred for political power. Evil is knowing children are hungry and choosing to cut food programs anyway. Evil is looking at the stranger, the refugee, the different, the other, and choosing cruelty over compassion, indifference over effort, complacency over discomfort. and we let evil flourish because calling it evil was too offensive, too crude, too antiquated. Our carefully crafted language around systemic issues, structural problems, and complex motivations gave us distance. And while we paralyzed ourselves with the pursuit of purity, evil built coalitions of the willing and the angry. While we cast out the hopeful and the progressive for their imperfections, repeatedly choosing being right over being effective, evil just got to work. This word, evil, is not an anachronistic relic of a bygone era. Today, it's essential because there are still tens of millions of Americans who use this language, who use this word, who understand the world in such terms, who are waiting for religious voices to call evil by its name and then to rise against it. When we abandon this language, we abandon them to those who would use it only to condemn, never to heal. And this is why Unitarian Universalism matters in this apocalyptic moment, not despite our liberalism, but because of it. While others use faith as a weapon to divide, we Unitarian Universalists insist that faith can be a tool to heal. While others preach a God of vengeance and exclusion, we proclaim the sacred worth of every human being. While others build walls, we build bridges. But our time of comfortable liberalism is over. The luxury of being the gentle, reasonable religion, the one that never makes anyone uncomfortable, never demands sacrifice, never speaks of sin or evil or judgment, that luxury is a privilege we can no longer afford. Our house is burning, and it is time to stop discussing the philosophy of water pressure. This is Tikkun Olam, the repair of the world, and it will not happen through good intentions and committee meetings alone. It requires us to become the religious community this moment demands: prophetic, courageous, uncompromising in our commitment to justice, even when it costs us. And the time is now. As this congregation prepares for a transition, as we ready ourselves for new leadership, we must understand witness is preparation. Getting clear about our obligations to our neighbors, our community, our nation. This work cannot wait for September, cannot wait till the next election, cannot wait for the perfect moment, cannot wait for someone else to take the next step. And here is the final revelation that apocalypse brings. We are alone in this work. There will be no deus ex machina, no white-bearded, ultra-buff dude descending on a fluffy cloud to rescue us or our democracy while we debate the words of yet another strongly worded statement. No savior will emerge to fix what we have collectively broken. No invisible hand of history will bend the arc toward justice. This is perhaps the hardest truth for people of faith to accept, that God, however we understand the sacred, the divine, the transcendent, whatever that is, it is not going to intervene to save us from ourselves. If salvation is on offer at all, it will only come from the work of human hands. It will speak only through human voices. It will act only through human courage. We are the answers to our own prayers, or there will be no answer at all. The Hebrew scriptures are really clear about this. When Pharaoh enslaved the people, God did not thunderbolt him from heaven. God raised up Moses, a stuttering, reluctant man who at first had neither voice nor courage. When Babylon shattered Israel, God did not send armies of angels. God raised up prophets to tell truth to power, and when that failed, and it did fail repeatedly, the prophets kept hope alive for those in exile. And when Rome murdered early Christians, God did not topple the empire with earthquakes. God raised up ordinary people, fishermen and tax collectors, slaves and widows, ordinary people, people who chose to live differently, love radically, and resist faithfully, even unto death. Those ordinary people are us. This is our Rome, our Babylon, our Pharaoh's court. And Apocalypse reveals not that we are powerless, but that we are powerful beyond measure, and that our power is the only power that can save what we love. We are the ones we have been waiting for, not someday, not when we feel ready, not when the conditions are perfect, now. In this moment of transition, in this time of testing, in this apocalyptic hour when the old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born. So here's what we do. We work the system and we break the system. We run for office and we block ICE raids. We vote in elections and we shut down injustice. We scream every time they pull money, every time they steal, every time they lie. We build power and we use power. We engage wherever change can happen, in city halls and in the streets, in courtrooms and at the kitchen table, through ballots and through our bodies. And we turn to each other, this church, this community, gathering even now in transition, even now with political unrest unfolding all around us. This is not just a place of refuge, but a factory for resistance. Not just a sanctuary, but a workshop where we begin pulling the lumber together to build the world we want to see. Here in these pews, among these people, we practice the democracy we want to create. We listen across difference. We disagree without demonizing. We remember that acts of decency, of inclusion, of hope, these are not just nice ideas, but essential work. They are our Unitarian Universalist values made manifest. They are revelation in action. My friends, the world is ending. But here is a hidden truth. Exactly. The world is always ending. But this is not a cause for despair. It's a cause for hope. Today, we remember the dead. We honor the fallen. Today, we speak their names and tell their stories. But let us remember them truly. They did not die for the world as it was. They died for the world as it could be. They made a bet on the future. They bet on us. They died believing democracy was worth defending. Are we defending it? They died believing freedom was worth fighting for. Are we fighting for it? They died believing justice was worth the sacrifice. So what are we sacrificing? These questions sting because we know the answer. But here's what else we know. Here's what we know about endings, about change, about the possible. The world of slavery ended because someone ended it. The world where women could not vote ended because someone ended it. The world where children worked in factories ended because someone ended it. The world where love was criminal ended because someone ended it. The world is always ending because we are always the ones who end it. But endings are not gentle. They do not come through good intentions and polite conversation. They come through the fierce commitment of ordinary people who decide they will no longer tolerate the intolerable, who refuse to be comfortable while others suffer, who choose to act as if the world they want is not only possible, but inevitable, who understand that democracy is not a spectator sport, is the work It is the work of our hands. So let us make this promise to the dead, this Memorial Day promise, that their sacrifice will not be in vain, because we refuse to let it be in vain. That the democracy they died to preserve will be preserved by the democracy we choose to practice. That the future they could not live to see will be the future we refuse to let die. The world is always ending. Thank God. But we Unitarian Universalists know that revelation is not sealed. We know that it writes and rewrites itself through our hands, our voices, and our courage to act. And we know that it is time to begin it again. So it was written, so it shall be done. Amen.
Visit us at uusg.org.